To paint a better portrait of the real Vincent van Gogh, Doctor Who Confidential joined Tony Curran at the Getty Museum in LA to meet up with curator Scott Allen and take a look at one of Van Gogh's most famous masterpieces.
I've lived in Los Angeles for 5-6 years, and yeah, as the entertainment capital, which is fine and all that, but California itself, it's an incredible state. And just to come up to the Getty here, I come up here quite often just to look at the artwork. But it's an incredible place just to be, just to relax.
Situated in the hills of Santa Monica, the Jean-Paul Getty Museum owns and exhibits important major artworks and is home to one of the most valued Van Gogh paintings, the irises.
Architecturally, the museum complements the garden quite beautifully.
No, absolutely, and they were designed very much in concert with one another over the space of many years, in fact.
It's an incredible place, but it's an amazing view of the whole of Los Angeles as well. This was painted maybe about a year and a few months before he died.
That's right.
1888, you were saying?
May of 1889, and then it was
right.
the following summer that he shot himself.
Because it is one of the many paintings that he painted while he was in the asylum.
This painting was done at a particularly
Low
critical
point.
and poignant time in his life. In December of 1888, about 5 or 6 months before he painted this, there was that infamous episode in Arles in the south of France where he cut his ear. He was hospitalized. He had a few more bad episodes in the coming months, and eventually, just out of his own fear of his sort of encroaching mental illness, he checked himself in. In many ways, part of his therapy was his painting.
Absolutely.
And the garden was one of, a little corner of nature that was readily available to him in the asylum. And for the first month or so, he wasn't going outside the walls. So you can just imagine him, encountering this little patch of flowers.
I read somewhere that Paul Gauguin said that, Van Gogh would maybe paint, 3 or 4 or 5 paintings in the time it took Gauguin to paint one.
If you think about, he was in the asylum for 1 year, and he painted 130 canvases. So that is a lot. So that averages, a picture every 2-3 days. So he's painting fast. And a picture like this, he called a study of nature, which would suggest that it was, a fairly spontaneous and impromptu thing. And at some level, I think it was. But it's also a carefully composed picture.
Indeed.
And it's at a scale, this is a standard-sized canvas for the time, but it's a size that he normally reserved for more sort of panoramic landscapes. So he was according a kind of importance to this close-up study of nature that suggests that, he may have looked on it as a more of a composed picture.
There's a quote that Camille Pissarro said that he would either go mad or artistically he would leave us all behind. Maybe his artwork was ahead of its time.
I think that's part of it, and also because he was so far away from Paris, and that's where the center of the avant-garde was. That's where all the the dealers working with those artists, the alternative exhibitions, that's where all of that was happening, and he very purposefully left that behind. And so part of it is just, one really wishes that he, obviously didn't kill himself, but, had at least, lived a few extra years because he would have seen the fruits of his efforts. Because already in the last 6 months of his life, there were some important critical articles about him in Paris. Artists were showing real interest in his work, which this picture and the famous Starry Night, which is in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, those were both shown at the big independent art salon, the Salon des Indépendants, in 1889, and all the other avant-garde artists were like, this is incredible stuff.
If you stare at this long enough, it's wonderful that you do lose yourself in it. I find anyway. I think
you look at it in the context of the gallery, and the painting immediately pops off the wall compared to everything else, just with the intensity of the colors and also the really sharp graphic quality that everything is drawn with.
Thank you.
All right, pleasure.